I do my dinner plates, I use 5 pounds of clay. For a salad plate, I only use 3. But for the demo today, I'm going to show you 5 pounds. And what I find my students find the most difficult is actually centering the clay when you're using more. So I have them make 2 small plates and 1 large plate so they kind of get the feel of it. But like I said, we're gonna use 5 pounds today. So I'm gonna start, I'm gonna throw it on my wheel. And then to help it get on center, I kind of just pat it to place. You wanna get it as close to the middle as you can before you have to start moving the clay. So you kind of feel like an 8, kind of like you just want to make funky sounds or something. You're just hitting it to get it as close to the center as you can. Once you feel like you're there, it also helps to kind of get your clay to stick. So I'm going to start by centering the clay. So I'm going to push in and pull up. If you're starting on plates, you should be able to center by now. But for this, I'm just going to show you the instruction will be purely on plates. I hope to get some centering videos up in the next couple weeks. So I'm using my hands to push my hands together to pull it up, making sure there's not a hole in the center, because then you'll create air bubbles, and then push it down. I'm going to push down as much with this part as my hand as I can to begin with. And then from there, I'm going to push down with this big old sponge. So I'm going to kind of clean it off some. But still have it nice and damp. When I hold this sponge, I'm gonna hold it so all my fingers fit nice across like that. And I'm gonna be pushing evenly with all my fingers. All right, so I'm gonna just work on this half of the clay. So I'm gonna start spinning and I'm pushing down. I'm gonna lift up as if I see another place to push. I want to keep pushing it down until my thickness is 1 inch. A lot thicker than how you normally throw pieces. Usually it's 1/2 inch, but when you're cutting plates off, you're more likely to cut more clay because it's a wider surface, and you'll take a lot of clay off when you're trimming, as you could tell from the other video. If you haven't watched that one, go ahead and watch it. It's up on my YouTube. So I'm pushing and pushing. Again, push and push. And I come out to about the edge of this bat. Now, my bats, there's 2 size bats that I use. There's the large one, and there's a smaller one. But I like to use this one for plates, just because it gives me the diameter that I want to work towards. So consistently, my plates are the same size. So if you've looked on my wheel, there's this is a Brent C model, so my wheel head's wider than my bat. So now that I have a nice flat surface, I'm going to check my thickness with my needle tool. So how I hold my needle tool is with a pointer. I'm going to stick it in, use my finger to pull it out. And you can see right there's my distance, and that's about 1 inch. So I'm doing good. The next step, I'm just gonna make sure it's nice and smooth. Even though we didn't pull the clay across for this, I guess I'm kind of superstitious and I wanna do everything I can to help the clay remember to go back into the center. So there should be no S-crackings on this because you're not pulling the clay out. And that's one of the reasons you just push straight down. But I don't like for my stuff to crack, so I go ahead and about 3 times kind of push this back in, just to make sure. last thing you want is to put all this work in and have cracks. So then I'm gonna get my metal rib, clean it off nice and dry. Sorry. Oh, what's that? So I'm gonna clean my metal rib off, and I'm gonna just kind of smooth that out nice. And then I'm ready to take this portion. You can see, so I'm ready to take this portion around the edge and bring it up into a nice little cylinder. One way, a little shortcut, is to take your wooden modeling tool and kind of go in just to get a place for your fingers, especially for if you've never made a plate before. Helpful hint. So I'm going in there, clean off my hands, get my wet sponge, and I'm going to place my inside middle finger in a little bit while I push from the outside, and I'm going to pull up a little cylinder. Then what I do, I tell my students after they get that pulled up, you're gonna pull it up to as much as you want. If you have any excess, if this is not even, this is when you need to trim your plate. Because after you flatten this ridge down, it's not gonna be easy to trim. So you wanna go ahead and trim it now, and go ahead and trim underneath. So if you're trimming, you'll use your needle tool to make sure that lip is nice and even around, so when you push that lip down, it'll all be even. But you're also gonna get all this extra clay. Like we said, you're using 5 pounds of clay. A lot of it you don't need, but it just helps when you're making. But you can always wedge it up and use it again. So I'm gonna take a lot of clay. You can see right here how much clay is taken off. And then I'm going to remove that nice and slow. If this scares you, as it comes out like this, I tell my students, they can just rotate the wheel as they go. If the pedal scares them into thinking that they're clay, they'll like jab their plate or something. But you should be able to get this big old piece off, and as you can tell, that's a lot of clay that I just took off. And I'm just gonna put it over here and let it stiffen up so I can use it again on another project. So once I've done that, I'm gonna get my metal rib and clean this up. So this is just a basic plate. This is the way I learned how to throw plates. I throw them a little differently for my own dinner sets that I make, but this is just the basic plate that I teach my students to do. So once I get my metal rib and get that nice and straight and smooth how I want it, the next step is to flatten the lip. So I'm taking my metal rib, just a simple metal rib, and I'm gonna take the outside edge and I'm pressing it down, and you're going to form a nice ridge. Go ahead and you don't want it up any, because clay is going to kind of remember that, and as it dries it's going to go up more. So go a little bit down. It's very finicky, because if you go too far down, it's just going to collapse. So you've got to find the perfect thing in between. So where it looks good, and if it raises just a tad in the drying process, it's not gonna screw up the plate. So for me, this is looking nice. So I'm gonna maybe go down just a hair more. Like I said, you don't wanna go down too much, or you will totally be sad when your plate edge collapses. So just some finishing touches, making sure my tool is nice and clean. and getting that very smooth center. Because no one wants to eat off a plate that has a little bump in the middle. So after I've thrown my plate, I'm going to do my last touch. When I use around the edge, I get a piece of chamois, which is just like a soft leather, and I put it on a film canister. The reason is this has to stay wet, so this makes it float in the water so you can always find it. So this is what I use to smooth that lip. Get it nice and wet. And I'm just going to go around the edge real slow and smooth that out. The last thing I'm going to do is use my wire tool to cut it off. Now you'll notice that this is not a wire tool. It is just string and washers. Again, I teach high school and they have a little toolbox of tools they use, and the real metal ones would break and kind of start cutting their fingers. So a good solution is just some really strong string. This is type of fishing string, and some washers so you have something to hold on to. So kind of measure how far you need it. You're pressing your fingers down, pulling as much as you can out to keep it as straight, and then it's cut. You do not want to lift this off the bat today. But that's your plate. So it's ready to dry slowly, and you can see the edge right there. Anyways, so it's ready to dry slowly. Keep it uncovered until it's stiff. When this lip gets kind of stiff, I put another bat on it to help it dry slowly, and then cover it with plastic, depending on where I am. I usually let these take about like 2 or 3 days to dry before I trim, and then another 2 or 3 days, because you don't want any cracking in a plate. If you've ever made a plate and it's cracked, make sure you dry it slowly. That is the key. Thanks for joining me. Hope you enjoy making plates.